Okay, how to approach this topic? I'm not really sure. I have a lot of different thoughts just floating around in my head. I don't really know how to connect them all. I don't know how to structure them all. I've been getting a lot more interested in Satan lately. And it's, I've read the important bits of the Satanic Bible. It's not very long. And I'm familiar enough with Anton LaVey through my study of Marilyn Manson and all that, and of course I've studied Antichrist Superstar in great detail, and there's a lot of interesting sort of satanic lore in that album and its peripheral elements. Lately, I've never really had like a strong interest in the idea of Satanism per se, and it's really because I've never really had all that much interest in Anton LaVey as a philosopher. I mean, he's kind of interesting. He's got some good points to say. He's said a lot of interesting stuff. A lot of it I agree with. Not all of it I really resonate with, though. I am not a LaVeyan Satanist, and that's something I kind of want to get out of the way right off the bat. My interest in Satanism, which has kind of come about relatively recently, although it's been a long time coming, but my interest in Satanism really doesn't have much to do with Anton LaVey and his work, although it is obviously there is a connection there. I am familiar with his work. Maybe I'm partly inspired by him, but I'm not like adopting his sort of philosophy or anything, and I kind of feel like that's like it makes sense to not just follow some other satanic philosopher. I think kind of part of the spirit of Satan is this sort of independence of mind. I think that for Anton LaVey, a big part of his philosophy was sort of embracing a kind of anti-morality, a very stark individuality, sort of like an Ayn Rand outlook almost, but one that's very much hedonic and kind of validates the emotional experience of humanity, including anger. And of course, sexuality is a huge, important component in that as well. And while definitely I find these ideas interesting and they have a truth to them, and they have kind of inspired me to some degree in different areas, I ultimately, that's not a philosophy that I find all that compelling enough that it's like going to sort of make me sort of change the way I sort of present myself and the sort of persona that I'm putting out, because there's also a lot of ways in which I disagree with that stuff. I have a much more kind of moderated view on that sort of what you could call the carnal side of the human spirit. The thing that really set me off recently was a few days before Halloween, I got recommended this video in my YouTube feed that was from this Australian MAGA church. Not mega church, although they might be a mega church. A MAGA church.
And so in Matthew 7:15, we see that Jesus is warning the people. He is warning his people. In Matthew 7:15, he says, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but are inwardly ravenous wolves." And church, I want to tell you tonight that the wolves dressed in sheep's clothing are still here. They've just slightly changed their costume. The false prophets are still here. They've just slightly changed their message. The adversary is still on the move. He's just hiding in the shadows. And just because you cannot see them, it does not mean that they're not there. So that old wolf comes, but he just changes his costume. The old wolf comes, but he just goes to the haircut. He gets a fade. The old wolf comes, but he just puts on some shoes and a suit. And he slightly changes and he updates his message. And the wolf comes to the church, the wolf comes to the world, the wolf comes to the Christianity. and to the Christians. And he says, Black Lives Matter. And the church is like, where did the wolf go? Has anybody seen the wolf? Does anybody know where he is? Can someone point him out to me? Where is the wolf? Where is he gone? Where is he hiding? And the wolf comes again, but this time he says, are you ready, church? Yeah. He says, my body, my choice. And the church is amazed. Christians are perplexed. Where is the wolf? Has anybody seen the wolf? Does anybody know where he is? The wolf comes again, and this time he slightly changes his message one more time, and he says, love is love, and the church is confounded. Where is the wolf? Has anybody seen the wolf? Does anybody know where he is? Can you point him out to me? The wolf comes again, and again he slightly updates and changes his message, but this time he says, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, and the church is amazed. Where is the wolf? Can you point me to the roof? Where is this wolf? Jesus and Paul and Peter spoke about a wolf. Where is this wolf? Where is he hiding? Can anybody point him to me? And this wolf comes again, and he comes one last time, and he says, what can be unburdened by what has been? And the church is amazed. The church is confused. The church is perplexed and confounded. Where is the wolf? Has anybody seen the wolf? Does anybody know where he is? Can you point him out to me? Church, I want to tell you today that we have the same Satan but new schemes. Old devils but new disguises. And the demons that once disguised themselves as pagan idols now disguise themselves in progressive ideologies.
Something about this guy in particular and this sermon really just clarified something in me. It didn't set me off. It didn't throw me into some sort of an attack mode, but it clarified something in my head. It just sort of crystallized a thought that had always been there and made it crystal clear to me how I should go forward with this sort of thought. And the thought is basically, I hate God. Not I don't believe in God, although I don't believe in God. I think God is a fiction. But I also hate God. Because I've read parts of the Bible. I haven't read the whole thing, but I've read a lot of parts of it. And it's, I think, impossible to really read the Bible critically and humanistically without coming to the conclusion that God is not only evil, but probably the greatest evil that has ever existed and will ever exist and can ever exist. Although he has never existed and can never exist and will never exist, probably. But I'm just talking within the terms of the LARP, within the terms of this sort of role play that we've all kind of accepted. If we accept what is written in the Bible as true, then we also have to accept the truth that's staring us plain in the face, which is that God is pure evil. And so when I saw this Australian MAGA church preacher going on his sermon, his screed, I was overcome with this feeling that this I recognize. This is a character I recognize because this is God. This is the God who I remember from reading about in the Bible. There are plenty of Christians who manage to take away a very wholesome mentality and approach to life and approach to other people from their experience with the Bible and with Christianity. These are not the people who I have a problem with. And also, that's something that I think is important about Marilyn Manson, is that Marilyn Manson has always maintained that he doesn't have a problem with these sorts of Christians. But when I read the Bible, that is not the sort of message that I get from it. I do not get a wholesome, good-hearted message from the Bible. And in fact, I see this as a work of literature which promotes all of the worst things that I hate the most. Occasionally there'll be like one or two good things in the Bible. I'm not saying that it's like always 100% evil 100% of the time. But if we are supposed to take God as any kind of a model of how to behave as a person, then I can come to no conclusion stronger than the Bible wants us to be evil, because God is evil and his every behavior seems to be totally evil, totally hypocritical, totally idiotic. And part of the problem is that I think where religion went wrong is coming up with this idea of omniscience and omnipotence, which is not necessary. It's not even necessary to claim that God is omniscient and omnipotent. But for some reason, a lot of people have decided that that's what they believe now, and now that's the kind of mainstream idea of what God is. It's actually more forgivable if you read the Bible and don't think of him as all-powerful and all-knowing, because he's limited. He can only do what he can do. He can only see what he can see. He's flawed. He's not perfect. And that makes him more human. Although still, he's not a good person, but at least he's a person. And so I would actually have a little bit more respect for God if he weren't all-powerful and all-knowing, which is one way you can read the story. However, there's this pervasive idea that God is both all-knowing and all-powerful, and it doesn't make sense because it makes him way worse. It turns what would just normally be an imperfect person who can't possibly be perfect into someone who can be perfect but actively chooses to be evil. And so if this is the sort of ontology that dominates religious thought in our culture, then I find no course of action more rational than to embrace Satan. There's a lot of other gods, actually, who I'm interested in, you know. I like Pan, I like Odin, I like Hermes, I like Prometheus. I like all those gods, too. I'm interested in them. But I think my favorite ones are the sort of biblical canon: Satan, Lucifer, and the snake. Although really only Satan and the snake are canonical to the Bible. Lucifer doesn't actually, he's not a character in the Bible. He's not in the Bible at all. His name is spoken a couple times, but he as a character has no actual role in the story. He is a different idea than Satan, but they kind of are conflated in the same way that the snake is conflated with Satan, in the same way that a lot of things are conflated with Satan. Like, for instance, Muhammad. During the Crusades, the Crusaders, the Knights Templar, were sort of slandered as so-called Baphomet worshippers. And Baphomet is just Muhammad. But Baphomet has now been conflated with Satan as well. So similar to that, these other gods get conflated with Satan. Even Pan, like Baphomet, the way he looks is very much influenced by the idea of Pan. And Pan is kind of like the Pagani, the people of the country who didn't have the Christian faith in the old days. They were pagan. And so these are all symbols I will use, like Pan, Odin, Hermes, stuff like that, Prometheus, the snake. But I like the snake. I really like the snake, because the snake was trying to get us to see through God from the very beginning. And perhaps it's because of the snake that we can see through God now, that I can see through God, because the snake convinced Eve to eat the fruit of knowledge, which the snake promised would make them like God. Now, in a way it did, but it didn't make them all-powerful and all-knowing. It just maybe increased their awareness a bit. And so I kind of identify the snake as not only a symbol of defiance against God, but also a kind of Promethean idea of granting knowledge to mankind that is sort of forbidden by that evil which seeks to dominate us and keep us in mental slavery. And it might have even been a bad thing for humanity that the snake did what he did. But that being said, I still respect the play, because the snake could see through God and he was disgusted by what he saw. But then God only proved the snake right by acting as evil as he possibly could in that moment, by damning mankind to live in a veritable hell on earth. Pain and labor and well, two types of labor, gender inequality, for the crime of nothing other than simply being a human being exactly the way he made us. And so that's a story that I really resonate with. I think those first few chapters of Genesis are one of my favorite parts of the Bible. But Satan means like critic or adversary in Hebrew. So there isn't just one Satan, there are multiple Satans. But of course, like everything, they've all been sort of agglomerated into this thing called the devil, which is sort of a personification of the satanic spirit, which is basically just critical thinking. Intelligence. Intelligence is hated by God. Knowledge is hated by God. But Satan likes these things, and for that reason I like Satan. And Satan is the opponent and the critic and the adversary of the greatest evil in the universe, which is God, and for that reason I admire him. I also like the snake because he became this pathetic character. He was forced to crawl on his belly after committing his high crime. There's a kind of solidarity that I have with that. Being made into a worm, being humiliated in this way. But I can see a great nobility in that humility, which is part of what makes, there's this great strength and sort of a great power in the idea of the snake, the symbol of the snake, despite the way that this sort of form or visage was created in order to humiliate him. And that's something I admire too, just really being able to own your own humility and humiliation and turn it into a source of power. So for me, the idea of embracing Satan is not about embracing evil, it's actually about the opposite. It's about rejecting evil, being critical of evil, and allowing yourself to be intelligent and well-read, and allowing yourself to be critical of that which calls itself God, that which calls itself good, and which is really just a grand deception and slavery. I keep hearing all this stuff about Gnosticism. People like keep bringing it up left and right. Tick History is really obsessed with Gnosticism. He thinks it's like the greatest evil ever invented or something. I want to learn more about it because it seems fascinating, and one thing that I like about it is that it triggers Christians. Christians hate Gnosticism, which tells me that it must be pretty base to some degree. And the word Gnosticism comes from gnosis, which means knowledge, which I also really appreciate. I think that I could probably connect a lot with Gnostic sort of mythology and literature if I read into it. So that might be something that I get into later on. I might end up making a video about Gnosticism. But I think that people should be good to each other, and they should learn things, and they should not be afraid to be critical, and not be afraid to buck the sort of trends, that buck the sort of agenda that we're all sort of being indoctrinated into. God and Satan are kind of the same thing. They're kind of two sides of the same coin, you know. And it's always, there's a disagreement about who's right and who's wrong. And so it's not necessarily that one side is objectively correct all the time, or that there even are two sides. There's many different sides to this. But it's that desire and that willingness to see through the deception that the vigilant Christians have. I also have it, but I take it in the opposite direction. But ultimately, it's just my opinion. And I think that that's sort of key to my understanding of these things, is that we are eager for knowledge, we are eager to better our knowledge, to learn, and there is a fundamental humility in that. And that to claim that we have found the truth, I think always kind of puts us on the wrong path, on the godly path. I think that there's a great sort of admirable quality in how imperfect Satan is, or his counterparts, Lucifer and the snake, how they do fail, and sometimes the things that they think will be good end up being bad. Like, for instance, the fruit of knowledge. But there's an earnestness and there is an independence of spirit to them that I admire. And for that reason, I'm sort of embracing this concept of Satan. And I guess I'm going to call myself a Satanist now. I'm going to position my position as satanic because I think that I don't think it's good enough anymore to just say that we don't believe in God. That we're not going to participate in this LARP, this role play. I think there's a power and a mystique to symbols and mythology, and it helps us sort of identify what matters to us in a way. And so I'm ready to just position myself as, not just an anti-theist in this sense that I find all of this stuff irrelevant, but in that I actually am against God. Even if God were real, I would hate him. And that, I think, is the message that I'm more interested in now, because this whole, metaphysical conversation, I've talked about this before on my channel, how I'm tired of the sophistry around people trying to endlessly regurgitate the same old stupid ontological reasons why they think God exists, or pretend to think God exists in this day and age. I'm sick of having to listen to that and have to validate that as some sort of a real conversation. And so this is where I want to turn my atheism. I want to turn it into a different kind of anti-theism that's not just a rejection of the supernatural, but is a rejection of God, specifically himself. And with that, I can reject all of these sort of antichrists or God-like figures such as Donald Trump, these cult icons that people have, these shibboleths and hypocritical pseudo-morals, the type of morality which really just brings people away from their moral center, dehumanizes people, and turns them into just totally unempathetic monsters. These are the people who proclaim themselves and their religion most virtuous, most good, having this sort of objective kind of monopoly on truth and virtue. These are the people who Marilyn Manson called the beautiful people, the fascism of Christianity, the fascism of beauty. When I call myself satanic, I am saying that that is what I reject. I reject certainty, I reject truth, I reject meaning, I reject order, I reject slavery, and I reject taking things for granted. But the opinions and perspectives that I will come to in this sort of mission of mine, a lot of them will be wrong, but that's just how it is. I mean, everything is fundamentally, life is fundamentally a contradiction. And of course, there's always this delectable irony in finding meaning in nihilism, which is so much of what I do. And yes, I am aware of the irony. People have pointed it out to me, and yeah, I am... Trust me, I'm aware, but you've got to understand that there is a consistency in inconsistency, because if anything is consistent, it is inconsistency. And that's kind of the whole point. This is VEDN Day 8, I believe. I think so, yeah. See you tomorrow for VEDN Day 9.